The EU Policy Lab is working to identify how private land conservation can contribute to biodiversity targets and how we can incentivize and compensate private landowners for their efforts. To conserve and restore biodiversity by 2030, we need to protect 30% of land and sea. To reach this goal, the EU Biodiversity Strategy calls for at least 10% of publicly defined land with strong protection measures, and the remaining 20% to be complemented by other forms of legal protection, so that in the end, we establish a cohesive network of protected areas in the EU. The Mosaic Policy Lab, named Private Land Conservation in the EU, studies how we can encourage private landowners, which may be individuals or organizations in the civil sector, to contribute to biodiversity on their own land. Private land conservation is an umbrella term for the voluntary measures enacted by these private parties to help preserve and restore habitats, species, or ecosystems and their services. These efforts can be supported in various ways, adding innovative policy instruments to the roster of land conservation. Private land conservation can take a number of forms. In a land stewardship, for instance, private landowners can turn over the burden of land management to land stewards. In Catalonia, for example, around 80 NGOs and other agencies took care of up to 62,000 hectares of privately owned land. In privately protected areas, on the other hand, private landowners can set up a management plan for land conservation, often building on the expertise and financial support of public agencies or nature conservation organizations. In Flanders, for example, private landowners can draw up a nature management plan which defines how and by whom their land will be managed in the short and the long term. And this includes financial compensation for their efforts. Meanwhile, conservation easements are voluntary agreements of private landowners to restrict the use of their land, which are noted in a land registry. This means that the agreements will run with the land in the coming years, even in the coming decades. In the Swedish Tullstorp Stream project, for example, farmers attributed the land along the local river to an association, while still remaining the owners of the land. In this EU Policy Lab, we will work with EU policymakers, policy advisors, landowners, nature conservation organizations, and other stakeholders to explore how private land conservation can contribute to the biodiversity goals.
Find out more about the European Policy Lab in the Mosaic Project website.